Perfect. So why don't I start in on sort of the semi-formal version I've got, which is just sort of show you what we're at and why we're thinking about making a change. And then some of the three options we're currently exploring as potential tools that could supplement or replace Meetup. And I'll talk about the two different strategies and styles that may happen.
Okay.
All right, so let me turn on my screen share. Great. So thank you so much for joining me here today. I know we've got some fairly new organizers here who have not had the same years of deep experience with Meetup. But I think what you found so far is Meetup is pretty easy to use, tends to work most of the time. But what we've discovered over the 10 years we've used Meetup is that it's really amazing and powerful for finding new members in about half the cities where we've rolled it out. So in about 50 of the NetSquared cities, there are more than 200 members, and it's adding members every day at a very regular basis. So it's working very well in some communities where Meetup is widely used. In the other half of our communities, Meetup is never used. And therefore, it doesn't really help us find new members, which is a major piece of why we've used Meetup. Because as you can see on this little chart here, Meetup has allowed us to grow without having to really do much marketing over the years. Mostly, it just brings people in slowly and steadily, and now we're at over 43,000 members, and it brings in, as you can see over here, between 800 to 1,000 new members every 30 days, like clockwork, and that's pretty remarkable. And so that's worked out really well. But what we've discovered, of course, is we live in Meetup, which means we are tied to Meetup's priorities and what Meetup wants to do on Meetup's schedule. So if we want to do something other than what Meetup wants to do, or in a way that they do differently, that's just not an option for us. So if we want to create templates to support other kinds of event formats and make that really easy in Meetup, it's not what Meetup wants to do. If we want to start collecting email addresses or phone numbers for our members so we can start sending them things like SMS reminders, or send them other newsletters, that's really difficult to do in Meetup because we can't collect that information. And most importantly, because the members are going to Meetup can't be exported, we can't export their email address or anything like that, we are ultimately trapped within the platform. And the longer we stay in the platform, the more difficult a future transition becomes because the relationship with our members is mediated through Meetup. And so it means that we are basically tied to one tool, and it makes any kinds of transition difficult, which is why here we are 10 years later being very reluctant. But I think from the perspective of you as organizers, you need a tool that is going to allow you to do a lot of the things you're already doing. A lot of you are already building out your own websites, you're running your own MailChimp lists. I would like to sort of consolidate that and make that easier to manage across the network. From the TechSoup standpoint, we think that there are about 10,000 nonprofits in that 40,000 group who don't know that TechSoup exists, which is a tragedy. It means we aren't saving them money, they are throwing away their money. And also we know that, that's part of the TechSoup revenue stream is new members through the services of a request bring in some funds into the organization. So for all those reasons, I think we're looking at a way where we need to explore what does a future or a post-Meetup world look like. But as I talked about, Meetup is really ridiculously valuable in a lot of communities. Here in Vancouver, I'm at 2,600 members, and I didn't do a whole lot of work except for plan an event every month. Meetup did most of that work in my community. And so what we're looking at is for those communities where Meetup does bring value, where it is regularly finding new potential members for you, we would likely keep Meetup going in those communities and supplement it with another tool that would integrate with Meetup, but ultimately direct people to complete the registration on the centrally managed platform. So that way we can start building a sustained relationship. And even in those communities where Meetup is not actively being used, we would at a minimum keep it going for at least 1 year in all those communities to aid through the transition period. Because we can't export those people from Meetup, so we need to use Meetup at a minimum as sort of the announcements list to push people towards the new registration platform for at least 12 months. So my hope is that any transition we do is going to be slow, methodical, and is not going to come as a surprise to you as organizers, to your members, and certainly is going to allow us to transition as best we can the investment we have put into Meetup over these years. That's sort of my vision around it. I'd love to hear some of your initial questions before I show you some of the options and the features list we've been brainstorming over the previous 2 meetings.
Well, I guess I was thinking, oh, did I raise my hand? I'm sorry.
Go ahead, I can see it.
Okay. I was wondering what the demographics were of the folks that actually are using Meetup, to get a better understanding of, like in my community, of course, we have older people that are involved. And then it's very cyclical over here, from what I'm told, that every 7 years, the changing of the guard happens within the community leaders. So, and I'm not sure whether it's getting younger. I think it's still about the same age of those very involved. And it's very transient because we have a lot of Canadians that come down that live in this area and they vacation. So I guess that's what I was wondering what the demographics was for Meetup. And in regards to, even though I'm new, I would like to know whether that is still a good tool, for me versus other things. And I guess my only concern is like the more things as a web designer, we don't like to put in too many places where people have to keep on moving from page to page because, that especially older folks, they just don't go for that too much. From what I know, they like it nice and easy and to the point. And I'm afraid that if we integrate, that it'd be like an extra thing for them to do, and they might not do it. Because I've been trying to push people from Facebook to Meetup,
right?
Event thing, right? So I use the little ticket link, and then I push them to the Meetup group so they could at least RSVP.
Right.
But I don't think people are really catching on to that. They'll just RSVP on the event group, and they won't do the Meetup. So I'm wondering if that's also another thing that you guys looked into, because people, once they go to one place, they don't really want to go to another.
So that's a really great question. So the answer is, I would certainly say when promoting our upcoming events, with whatever transition approach we move, that we would basically use Meetup to send out the message, but we wouldn't actually link to the upcoming event, but instead push people to the new registration tool. Okay. Meetup is going to send its own automatic messages that will, of course, link back to Meetup. So we would need to, in that case, basically put the link on Meetup and send people back in this way you're doing with Facebook. So I think it's going to be imperfect, but what you've just said really sparks this idea we've been talking about, and I think is actually going to be an important part of this, which is at our event registration, because people are coming directly from Facebook, directly from Meetup, directly from a friend told a friend, and someone forwarded an email. So people often show up in our events who we don't know anything about. So I'll show you the features list in just a moment, but I think it would be really helpful for us to have basically like a little tablet-based like RSV registration app that people use just like to check in, like if I registered, yes, check here. Otherwise, enter your name and email address and like confirm your registration. So we're looking sort of like an on-site check-in app, basically.
Some ticket registries have that integrated into it.
Yeah, I think that's right. Several of them do. So we wouldn't have to create that ourselves, which is always a real bonus. And I think at least 2 of the options I've looked at do have something in that style. But I'm adding that into the chat window. And I would, if you can put that into the, basically, and I'll drop the link here to the, that's not the right link, to the core features list, that would be really helpful, because what we've been doing is just brainstorming what we really want to do. And that's, boom, it's gone into the chat window now. And so that's where we're all just sort of saying, like, oh, it would be really great if it could do this, or this is the kind of thing I'd really like to have. So that's, yeah, thank you. That's a great idea. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the tools, platforms. In fact, why don't I do that now? So here's the deal. So we've looked so far at 3 tools that we think really fit the NetSquared model. There, Andrew. And we think the NetSquared model is really interesting and difficult for most tools because it's really chapterized, which is to say, like, there's one parent account, and then there's the individual groups, the chapters, all of whom manage subsets of the data, and therefore have multiple organizers and managers with different roles within it. Therefore, something like Eventbrite, as much as it's a really great RSVP tool, doesn't fit NetSquared well, because many groups have like 5 different co-organizers with different roles and permissions. Plus, I want to come in, and Eventbrite doesn't really have this clear model of multiple people editing an event. There's a hack around it, but it doesn't work well for any of us who've ever tried that. So that's why the tool sets we've looked at are pretty limited, because what we're doing is a little bit unusual. So I've identified 3 tools over the last 6 months that fit the NetSquared data model of sort of chapterized accounts. And I'll walk through those 3 options so far, and I'll tell you the status where we're at with those. But here's my basic requirement for them, which is 1, they need to be as easy and user-friendly as Meetup. It needs to have APIs so we can pull that data in and out, and we really own that. Data ownership, we would have to sign a contract to be very clear that we would be co-owners of the data. So you as local organizers would also own and could export all of that data. So because you guys are the ones who actually are the local leads, building the relationships, and TechSoup would co-own that with you, invite those people in to become part of the TechSoup community. But that makes sense, because now that we would have exportable data, that data would need to come back to you as well. And then the last thing is, I'm not going to sign any contract with anyone unless they give me at least a 3-month demo account where we as organizers can create test events, do our own registrations, and really touch and feel the process to make sure that we think it's going to work for us. And I've been recruiting a team so far of about 5 other organizers who put up their hands to say, I want to be part of that decision-making process, and to put a bit of extra time into doing those demos. But I'll publicly announce those when those pages are up and ready, and can issue accounts to anyone who wants to go in and say, like, well, what does this look like on the back end? So that part's going to happen. And then that, just because you had that question about demographics, I'll show you the limited amount of information that's currently available in Meetup, and then we'll go into the 3 demos. For anyone else, if you guys have questions, I see some of you are on mute, just drop it into the chat window or give me a shout, and I'll sort of answer any questions as we go. Yeah, it's like there's certainly no need to wait until the end. But let me just turn on the screen share. So what we're looking at here is basically my central administration site for all of Meetup. And so you can see we're right now we're about 116 chapters. But what you really want to know is, who are our members? And the way to do that is, for me, I'll go into the chapter, and I can export this information for pretty much anyone. But basically, say we went to, you can filter in by any group. And there it is. There's the group, and just want to export that. And when you export that, you're going to get a whole bunch of ugly data, but you can start doing some basic information, and I can export this for pretty much anyone. And what it really starts showing you, and this is what we currently have in Meetup, and this is like all the data basically, is it's going to show your group name, your all that kind of stuff. But what I think you're most interested in, and let me see if I can increase that so it's more readable. As we scroll through here, you can start getting your average age of your members, as well as it starts showing things like a guess at their gender. And because I don't think they're really asking for that within Meetup, I think it's probably using some formula based on names being on average a certain gender. So we can say that, it looks like they think that about 52% of your membership are female, and that their average age is about 42. But that's about all we really get around core demographics of who's actually joined our groups on Meetup. So it's pretty limited right there. But that's the two pieces of information we currently have. And then I've got overall surveys of the NetSquared groups, which are self-reported around, around what their focus areas are within their work, whether they work for nonprofits, consultants, or other. But that's not at the individual group level, especially for a newer group. Rather, that's more global. But I'll put a link to the NetSquared survey into the chat window as well. And that way that you can sort of see and get a sense of just who are these people. There we go, drop it into the chat. Boom. So that's a little bit about us. So now I'll go through into the three tools we've looked at and just sort of talk about like their different approaches. So back into the screen share. Sounds good. And so basically what we've been doing is adding all the core features that we need based on these demos. We've been sort of putting together a list of like, what is it that we need from a future tool? And so this is an open document that anyone can edit. So I encourage all of you to throw your ideas in there. Things like, having like, let's just put unfiled, and that would just be like, on-site RSVP app or so check-in app. So those are the kinds of things anyone can just drop in here, and we'll start figuring out how best to figure it out. But this is going to be the core like features requests we'd like globally, and then we can come in and figure out how we actually approach that for what the priorities are. So we've looked at basically three different tools. So the first of those tools is something called Invite. And Invite basically allows you to create chapterized events in the NetSquared model. It looks like so far it's a bit more of a simple tool than Meetup. What it basically has is the ability to do a standard newsletter and event RSVPs, but it doesn't have things like the community features like mailing lists or bulletin boards or things like that. But what it does do is basically allow you to create a nice map, have people, search for where they're at, and then show you events, and then invite you to sign up for a newsletter. So very Meetup style like that. And then you can go into each one of like, here's a specific event. And so this will basically bring you into a specific event page. And so here it is with a nice big title, the location, register now, all the details. And so what you're seeing from here is a pretty basic process. In this case, we'd have a free event, but it would sort of go like this. And this tool was actually recently bought by Eventbrite. So it uses some of that core Eventbrite technology on the back end. But otherwise, what you're seeing right here is a pretty standard process, like, your name, your email, custom fields that they created. In this case, they need Gmail addresses because they're doing a Google specific training. And this is the kind of thing we could build out. So that's really what it looks like. I will do this afternoon a demo with these people for the second time, and I'll record this one. And so I'll have something showing a little bit more about the back end and some of the other questions later today. But that's sort of Endlight. They're probably one of the most simple, clear, direct, like, we do events, here's a solution to your event problem. And so that would be, so it's very similar to Meetup in that way, but probably a bit more stripped down. The second thing we really looked at is a group called Startup Grind. And Startup Grind looks like this. This is their website. And what they have offered is basically what they white label this solution for other organizations. And so in this case, you can just see like, yeah, it's a website, it's an email sign up. Here's all the blog posts that come through from each one of their chapter leads. And they've got about 200 chapters across their network. And so again, it's a search, it's an explore by region. And once you actually go in, what you're going to start seeing is something that looks just like this. And so what happens here is, it creates an event. And this one's in San Francisco. It's already happened. But it's got like about this event, the speaker, the time and date, all that stuff. And this is all really based on just some form fields you fill out, and it all sort of like lays it all out. So it's got like a real templated approach. But what's interesting about this event is when you as an organizer created this event within Startup Grind, what it automatically does is copies that event through the API directly to your meetup group. So if you also have a meetup group, it would automatically post your event to the meetup group, which is a nice little bonus. And then of course it drops a link here at the top, which would then direct you back to their platform to complete the RSVP on the page we just saw. So I like this approach because it really integrates in the two communities we already have, which is helpful. Because for some communities like San Francisco, we're never going to shut down Meetup. They're going to have 100 people joining every month like clockwork. Oh, you can write on the page. Cool, I had no idea. I don't think I did that. So that's sort of Startup Grind. And again, I'll get some more back-end pieces, but you can actually take a look at some of the mock-ups they've done for us. If you go into the Slack group, you'll see there that there is some mock-up images within the Net2 channel. And then the last of the three options we looked at is Nation Builder. Nation Builder really comes out of the political world and is designed from the very beginning to be a real full-on like content management system and CRM so it's all integrated, but it's all really built around the chapterized model. So I built up this really quick mock-up in a test account. And so basically here it is me creating something nice and ugly with like events, some of this other groups, some standard boilerplate, and then a map and a search, and then upcoming events. So you'll see all three of the tools have a very similar layout, which is just like search, maps, upcoming events. Like everyone has landed on that same solution. And so what they've done is then you can go and say, like, let's go into a particular tab. So let's go into Vancouver. I created one here. It can show the upcoming events for Vancouver. And then here are those events. And from there, you can go in and RSVP. And so here is where all the people who've already RSVP'd. You'll see it's got nice social media integration. So it actually shows people's little like Facebook or Twitter profiles, depending on how they logged in, because it's got social login support. And then you've got sort of comments and other activity along the bottom of the page. So that all looks pretty fun and easy. But what I quickly learned is that the back end of Nation Builder is a little bit terrifyingly complex. You'll see it's always got like these two lines of tabs of things that need to be updated. So I'll show you how you create an event. You click into events, and then from there, you're basically going to the settings, and you can start seeing, you go into, actually you go into events and subpages, and then from here, you can, potentially create new events, but I'll just show you like, here's an upcoming event, managing teams. And you'll see here's all the fields you can fill out. But what you'll see is for each one of these top tabs, it opens up all these bottom sub tabs with options. So it's full featured as a platform, but it also means you're going to be spending days and days potentially configuring at each level. And so this level of complexity makes me a little bit worried. If you want to play with this, I'd be happy to issue you an admin account, and you can I'll walk you through how to actually create an event. I created a short video just to walk people through. But those are basically the 3 different tools I've looked at. So far, the only one I've got a quote on is for Nation Builder, which is the most fully featured of the platforms, also the most complex. The cost was a little alarming. So it's probably not the top of my list. Right now, my first gut reaction is, I think the closest thing is going to likely be Startup Grind, depending on how they price things out. And otherwise, I think there's a Envite tool, and here's an example we're using an EdTech group, is a pretty close fit to what we as a community need. Or at least that's my initial take on it. But as I said, we'll be making sure that each one of these tools that we move ahead to the second level with are also going to be doing public demos for you guys. So I'll get out of the way, and they'll do a full demo where you guys can ask questions. So that's basically the end of my screen share part of this. And at this point, let's say, okay, I'm getting some other questions here. Yeah, and certainly you guys can also welcome to use voice as well. So from Lizette, we've got a question here about reporting analytics and then email. Do you get for each of the, so from my perspective, all of these tools are going to give me way better reporting tools for me working with you as an organizer and see who's active. Some of them do it a little bit more clearly, but we'll sort of see how that works. For you as an organizer, all of those are going to give you the access to export email addresses, message all the people within your local chapters, and they would all give you, from what I've seen so far, pretty decent reporting analytics. They're not going to do things like Meetup did, which is trying to guess age and gender. They're only going to report on the information we've actually collected. But I think they should all give us some good demos. And at the end of this, remind me, and I'll show you some of the mock-ups that came from Startup Grind, which actually show you some of the analytics pages. And that might be interesting to you. Yeah, from David, I'm getting this message that Nation Builder looks most professional, and I think I totally agree with that, actually. It is definitely, they're the tool that is least likely to disappear. They're the big player in this field. And they can do everything, but my feeling when I look at that is that level of flexibility also comes with a level of complexity. And because I know we're all working, with volunteers trying to do this in our off the side of our desk, my feeling is we would be better served as a community with something that is a bit more of a structured, like a tool rather than a platform, because the platform could turn into a large amount of administrative overhead. But we're going to have to balance the pros and cons out because we'll see how it all plays out there. Other questions about what you've seen so far? Because I know you've only really seen in most cases the front end, not the back end. And for you as organizers, the back end is oh so important because that's where you're going to be spending so much of your time. Yeah, well, that's sort of, that's my feeling as well, which is you're basically saying like I'm excited about how flexible we could be in 10 years. And certainly what we've discovered is Meetup has not changed tremendously in 10 years. And therefore NetSquared hasn't been able to change in those 10 years. But I'm excited to see what we could possibly do with these other tools, and hopefully they don't become wildly complex as they add features over time. So Lizette, do you want to maybe go to voice and just sort of talk a little bit more about this?
What I was saying, that goes back to what David was saying, though, that because it is more professional and maybe because of the complexity, it can be more flexible. If we stick to something that sort of like you guys were doing with Meetup, because of the ease of it, maybe you might get stuck in 10 years in the same predicament because it's not flexible enough to grow, grow with the group. So I don't know if that's I mean, I'm sure that's something you guys are looking into as well. And, I mean, it is nicer the other one that it integrates already with Meetup. The look of it and that it goes back to it. What was that one? The second one, the invite, I think it was.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether 10 years from now you're still going to want to continue that and not have the flexibility to be able to manage it the way you guys want to do it. But you said that the Nation one is very expensive.
It is. I was pretty surprised at those initial quotes. I'm like, whoo. But I haven't really got full pricing on the rest of them. So we'll put that all in comparison. My perspective when I look at the 10-year window is that technology just moves so fast that I always try and just sort of keep my eyes closer to maybe a 5-year window. And so I think what I'm looking for is something that is going to best serve us for what I think is likely to happen in the next 5 years. Because any transition we do gets us out of platform lock. Because right now we have the problem of platform lock, which is I can't export a unique identifier about our membership, which is email. Any of these other platforms will allow me to export all information because they are a platform you're paying full rate for, basically. And therefore, I can export, all the list data, all the memberships, even potentially all their passwords and all that stuff. So we can make future event platform transitions should it need to happen. And honestly, I think for those of us who've been in web development, we just see that cycle happen. It's like the world changes. And so being able to move to another platform, should we need to, is a powerful place for us to be. So from my perspective, if what we do only works for 5 years, that's fine, because at the end of those 5 years, I can bring all the data out and all the relationships out in a way I can't do right now.
Yeah, I'd like to also say that the more time we spend on testing the software, and it's going to help us launch whatever program we're going to use. But what I want to say is the more time we spend on these programs like Meetup, the more time I spend, and I learn every day something new from Meetup, and it's actually a wonderful tool. So I also think that we're gonna have to set time apart to go and look at all the features, and I honestly feel that the more time we spend on whatever resources we're given, like Meetup, it's really a great tool. So these new softwares that we're looking at, it's really, we need to write in there somewhere, you really need to spend time behind the computer and learn the system, because I think they're really cool, all of them. We just need to agree on a majority of us, see what's working best for everybody.
Yeah, I totally hear you on that. And I know you came in a little bit later, but just want to reiterate for those groups where Meetup does work for them because it's finding them new members, which is part of Meetup's magic. We'll continue to keep Meetup going in those communities. And unfortunately, probably have to go to a two-platform strategy, which is not perfect, but Meetup can be a really powerful acquisition tool. The other part of that is I agree we need to get ourselves hands-on with this. Because part of that is I really need your buy-in as the organizers and users. You're the ones who actually put all the time into these tool sets. So I'll make sure that for each one of these tools, we have both like a test account that we can all play with. And then we'll also have a lot of time to do this transition. And there'll finally be some really focused training on the best use of the new platform. And so we'll put together actually a little bit of an online course around that and really help guide people step by step on best practices with using that new tool. Because we know there is going to be a lot of new skills that are going to come there. But yeah, I think we should keep building this stuff out. So so I'm just going to pop into the video, the share screen one last time. And I'm just going to actually walk through some of the mock-ups we've seen so far from one of the other providers, just to give you a sense of what it could look like and what some of the analytics look like. This is basically the startup grind people theming their site into basically the standard TechSoup look and feel. So it gives you a sense of what that could look like. And so I'm just going to pop into here. And I'll open up a couple images, which are going to come in a little narrow, but hopefully they are going to work. 1, 2, 3. So yeah, so what we're looking at here is the startup grind thing, and I will try and really blow this up because I'll try and make it viewable. How's that? Does that sort of come through okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So what we're looking at on this first one right here is basically the central admin dashboard. So this is really the place that I would spend my time. And you'll see basically it's just got like the number of active versus inactive month to month. And this is the kind of thing I don't really have right now. So for me, this looks really, really exciting because this is exactly what I've always wanted, to get a sense of like, what is the health of the community? And then you just sort of see like the number of new chapters by month, some little charts. And I've dropped all these images into the Slack group. So if you want to take a look at these or download these, you'll definitely get a chance to look at that. And then it's got a breakout per region. Again, useful because this is the first thing everyone always asks me every month. You're like, how is it doing like this? How many new groups? And right now what I do is, because Meetup doesn't really allow me to export everything, I actually have someone go through and manually cut and paste all the event data from all 100 meetups every month and all the events and adds it to a spreadsheet. And then I need to create pivot tables from that. So if I could not have to have someone do this manual copy and paste from each event, that would be a huge win, because right now it's the only way I can figure out like how many attendees did we have in the previous month is to get someone to copy that data out by hand, which is sometimes error prone. And so then it's got a couple other nice little pages of just like how many people, like which groups are most active, which have the most number of RSVPs, all that stuff. So here's the next one. And now this is looking at basically the number of events. Again, it's just like another back-end chart. This is really mostly for me rather than you, so I'm just going to keep moving until we find something that this is, again, the same thing, really, but the number of members. But let's get into the world that you guys care about. And so this is, again, the website. So here's something that you guys are going to care about because it's more organizer focused. So what we're looking at right here is basically the basic admin chapter place for you as an organizer. And so what you'll see down here on the left is basically you get your own version of those analytics that I was just showing you at your specific group, like subset. You'd use the tab for all the events, then the newsletters you've sent out, your basic settings, and then the sponsors. And so what you're looking at here is the new event creation process. And so in their case, you'd have basically the title, the description, the longer description, an image, and then the schedule, and then the location. And then from there, it has another page like that, which is the people. And the people are going to be who are the hosts, which is basically who are you, as well as who are the presenters, because it's not a way for us to actually create full pages and profiles for the people speaking at our events, which is a nice format. And then you've got sponsors and partners, which is usually not going to change. So that would just click through. And then final one is tickets. They have paid events. In our case, we wouldn't in most cases. So that last step would be gone. But basically, we would just create out these different templates. So we'd say like, oh, we're doing a panel event, and then it would give a couple of fields. Or we're going to be doing like a hands-on workshop, and it would present some couple of fields for us to do. So we'd have some really set event templates that you get to fill out to start allowing us to do a bit more standardized and better designed pages for our events. So this is basically what the admin dashboard would look like. And what you're really looking at here, in this case, is San Francisco, and this is showing their upcoming events. You'll see in this case, they got the meetup logo, because in those cases, they've synced that event to a meetup. If you didn't have a meetup, then that logo wouldn't show up. What I think is really interesting about this is this little clue at the top here with red and green dots. That basically just shows how active you've been as a group leader. So in like, you can say like, okay, I see, like right now green is this month. So I have an event planned for this month, but not for the next 2 months. And for the previous 2 months, I had one event, but 2 months ago I didn't. So it's just a nice way for you to be able to see like how active has my group been. And that's something I'm gonna really like, because then I can just filter on that one and show you what's next. What we're looking at here is what the event page actually looks like once you fill out those form fields. And again, this is a mock-up. We'd actually design it later, but this is their standard template. So here's the title, the location, the date, the social links. And then from here you click and it would sort of pop up in a little, what are those things called, a light box kind of style, like here's your ticketing page. And then here's your boilerplate about, here's what the event was about. Again, the location, the where, and what I really like is an ability to add an agenda in a section, something that we don't really have as a structured content area in Meetup. And then the other thing that's unique about this is they really highlight you as the organizer in a way that we aren't currently doing with Meetup. And I think this is actually really important that we highlight the person who's actually hosting the event. And then after that, we say like, okay, here are the sponsors, and then here are the attendees. We'll see if everyone actually uploads their own profile photo when they create their account. But that is the, this is their mock-up of like what things could potentially look like. And so that's really what the events themselves look like. And then this is basically a mock-up of what we could potentially put in place of NetSquared.org, a site I'm not deeply happy with at the moment. And so again, it would just be like, hey, some nice images, the description of what is NetSquared, and then here are the upcoming events. And it would guess this based on your IP address. So it would sort of try and show you events that are most useful to you based on your location. And then of course there's the map, the search, and here's all the jazz. Like here's all the groups, and then here's the blog. And it would sort of bring your blog posts into your event group page, so it would all be sort of in one place. So that's really what we're looking at here. And then here's just a quick look of the standard login page. They have a LinkedIn option. We've been talking about adding potentially a Twitter login as well, so people can access their existing social profiles to log in as opposed to having to create yet another password. But that's essentially one of the tools. I hope to get a similar kind of mock-up from this from Envite as well. But that's sort of what we're looking at right now. So we're down to the final 5 minutes. Any other final questions or feedback? Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's a really nice layout. I agree with you. The analytics will be, when you're looking at them, will be very useful. You mentioned you might take away the tickets, but I was thinking if you didn't want to do tickets, maybe you might want to put registration, because you still want to capture that.
Yeah.
Some way, at least, in that respect, because you did mention before that you wanted to do an app where you could do check-ins with the tablet.
Yeah.
That's where that would integrate with that registration tool.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's right. We'd still, basically just need to have like ticket is free, and so we just don't have a lot of configuration to do there.
Right.
We've had some rough discussion over the years about what if we had paid events, how would we manage that? In the case of this community, they've got basically an 80-20 split. So the local organizer keeps 80% of the revenues collected from event tickets, 20% goes back to the mothership. That has not been the traditional NetSquared model, but it's one of those pieces of flexibility we wanted to keep open, because there have been some groups who have wanted to be able to collect some money at the door, sometimes for charity, sometimes to put resources back into the group. And so it's one of the ongoing discussions we're sort of having internally about, is that an approach we could take?
Yeah, that would consider a tax, something to consider regarding taxes in each individual location, and the Florida laws regarding receiving donations and things like that. So that would get complicated, I think, depending on that. And the percentage that you could actually be non-taxed, or for each event, and after a certain amount, like here in Florida, after like maybe 2 events, big events, you can't tax, but then after the 4th event, you have to tax. So it does get complex.
Yeah.
Take money.
Yeah, agreed, which is one of the reasons why we've been reluctant to follow that path. One, we want to keep our events very accessible.
Right.
But we also have heard from some groups, they're like, but it drives us crazy that only half of the people who RSVP ever show up. If we charge people, we would start solving that problem very quickly. But you're totally right. It brings this deep level of complexity. And just like, how do we distribute the funds? Where does taxes come in? We're in 24 countries right now. There's a lot of complexity around that. So I agree. It's the kind of thing we would be very cautious about moving into. So if there were any other features or ideas you had as we look through that, I would love for you to add those to this nice link here, and basically say like, here's what should be here, or like, don't forget to think about this as we go forward. And if you are excited about this process and want to be more deeply involved, I'll be here from you about every 2 weeks for the next 3 months. Send me a quick message and I'll add you to basically the platform consultation group, who's going to be the people who actually go in and like, we'll create accounts for all those people, and they're going to go in, create test events, register for those events, check with the back admin pages, really make sure that what we're creating is really usable at the organizer level. Because again, I have to reiterate, you're the ones doing the actual work. I'm the one, encouraging you, but you guys are creating 500 meetup events a year. So I need to make sure that what we're doing meets the needs you already are getting met elsewhere. Well then, why don't I bring this thing into a wrap? Thank you so much for joining me today. For those who maybe came in late, or who are seeing this video later today, at noon Pacific time today, we'll be doing the final of the 4 consultation discussions, which are going to be basically as we start brainstorming for this document. It'll be in our Slack group in the channel Meetup 2, and that's where I'll be dropping all the links, all the images. So if you just want to check in and say like, where are we at with this process so far, even if you aren't a part of the full committee, you're welcome to come in, take a peek, and see what's going on there. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining me today. Such a pleasure. Keep doing your amazing, and definitely let me know about any concerns or ideas you have, because I don't want to break what's working for you. Like, that's super important to me. So let me know. Put up your hand if something doesn't feel right, and we'll make sure that we do this in a way that is really respectful of what's already happening. Awesome. Well, then have a great day, and I'll catch up.